Hi, this is Sean. I recently taught a free live lesson about improvising, and at this stage we were talking about the mechanics, what I call the mechanics of improvisation. And while there are many strategies available, these are the ones that have worked best for my students over time. So I run you through some of the main ones and how to implement them and the kinds of things that will come from it. If this is your first time here, please do hit subscribe and the notification bell so you know when I upload new content. Please like this video, and if you have something good to say, please share a comment as well. Let's take a look at what happened on the live. Well, I noticed that most of you, when you signed up, were around the few tunes but no real freedom area. Very common patch for every jazz piano student. And that's probably the stickiest, hardest part to get out of. And that's where strategy and implementation are everything. That's when, if people are doing the wrong thing or the right thing in the wrong way, it just doesn't give them any freedom or skills. And I'm sure some of you will have been banging your head against the wall for months or years. I know I hear a lot of that. So we will be attacking head on what you should be doing, how you can be doing it, to give you a really good idea of how to structure your practice and approach to improvisation. What I'd like to do today is just really give you an overview with some tastes of how I approach improvisation with students. So it'll hopefully make some connections for you. We're going to talk about the mechanics of it. You know, what do you do melodically to start improvising? So actually building improvisation phrases is, I don't want to say it's not that complicated, but how to do it isn't actually complicated at all. The kinds of things I do with students involve learning to do more with a scale than just going up and down a scale. So if your idea of a scale is this, and that's it, then we've got to talk, all right? So let's begin with scale phrases and the kind of thing that anybody can be doing to start to give them an improvisation language. We will talk about how you get from this to improvisation as we go. So there's no use sitting there going, yeah, but that's not going to get me to play a song. Must be a different live I could be on right now. One step at a time, we will get there, okay? So first thing, learn to take your scale, whatever scale it is. First of all, do know your major scales at least, and your harmonic minor scales. Those would be my first go-to scales. We'll see why as well, but certainly major scales. Let's run a super quick poll actually. I would like to know if know all major and harmonic minor scales. I think people see scales as all or nothing. Either they know all their scales or they know a few and they don't really do much about the rest. Okay, so we've got a 60-40, yeah? 60% of people say, yeah, I know all my major and harmonic minor scales, and 40% say no. So, of course, I understand that in that 40%, you're not saying you don't know any scales, but there's still many to improve, yeah? So that is the first thing that you should be working on. So bearing that in mind, around half of us have got to work on just scales, let alone scale phrases, yeah? So, of course, people want to improvise, but you must give yourself those tools. Just run them up and down. Don't worry about how. We've got scale exercises for you on Jazz Skills, those people who are members or considering it. We've got everything you would need to get good at scales and build your own phrases with them as well. So let's build a few scale phrases. Let's take thirds. So there's a third. And I'm just going to take the third through the scale, okay? So taking things through the scale is essential. Most people who are getting into improvisation are a little bit taken aback by that idea. So if I say take this through the scale, I mean, all right, let's play the next third all the way through the scale. These are really simple things, right? We haven't finished here because we haven't played one on the 7th, right? So think this way, and then you'll know where you finished, because normally, well, not normally, a lot of people though, will say I'm done because I hit C. Now, not yet. Now you're done, right? Okay, what do we do with that? Let's see what happens if you put a half step below the first note. That kind of thing. That, I believe, was a run for Art Tatum. So, you know, there's even stuff in there. But these things are improv as well. Let's say if I'm playing D minor 7 to G7. both those chords are in the key of C, right? And therefore, if I'm taking the simplest approach, it's not the only approach, but if I'm taking the simplest approach, it's the C major scale, right? So I find a third that sounds good over D minor 7, join it to a scale, and try and end on a G7 note if possible. Stuff like that. You start practicing different ways to do that, and you suddenly start to get more fluency. Let's take one more scale phrase. Let's take a fourth. But in the fourth, I will run from the root to the fourth. Okay, and I'll do that through the scale. I'll do it quick because we want to fit a lot in, but you should do it as slowly as you need to be correct. Of course, this is just C major. It's not a harmonic minor scale, and it's not another major scale. You know, it's not B major. Then, you know, mess with it. What could you do with that? Okay, could you put a half step under it? I don't know. Yeah. Fine. Okay, you've already got something to do. Of course, you could do all these things down as well. Let's say half step under the top note. Oh, I like this one. There. Never done that one before. So with scale phrases, we've got anything you like. You could pick two numbers, and let's say you picked 1 and 5. Fine. You could come back down. Fine. Half step below. Okay. Instead of half step below, let's cut a note off. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Fine. Then the next one will be, right? If I'm here on E minor and I'm cutting off the E, then my first note's F, right? These things will become starter phrases as you go, yeah? And you'll learn to lengthen them later on. Of course, it all sounds fine in the beginning, but implementation is everything. So other things, other than just scale phrases, the Barry Harris rules, fantastic. Scale rules, what we used to do, and still do, is insert, let's take a simple rule. We insert an extra note when descending the scale. Okay, there are simple rules and extended rules. Let's just cover some simple rules as a taster. Let's say I'm descending the C major scale. Well, do you know what? Let's ascend it first and see why I would add the extra note descending. So if I ascend the note, the scale in eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, I get something that sounds like C major. Everything kind of figures out, assuming I'm on C major at the time. Now, if I descend from, say, C, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, it doesn't sound very C major-y anymore, right? And that's why in the major we add an extra note between 6 and 5. So, and notice what comes on the beat now. C6, a C major, right? So adding in extra notes can be really handy. Now, you do not need to do that if you're descending from anything other than a 1, 3, 5, 7, a C major 7 note. So let's see what happens if I descend from D. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. All the C major notes fall on the beat, no extra required. Because when I descended from here, can you hear that? We ended up with the same amount of notes and ended at the same time. So if I descend from 1, I need it. If I descend from 2, I don't need it. If I descend from 3, I need it because it's one of these notes. If I descend from 4, don't need it. If I descend from 5, do need it. Etc. So if I play this scale and then descend, do I need the extra note or not? John says yes. Let's wait for a few more answers before we go further. Zaz says no. Well, we got some yeses and some nos. This is going to be interesting. I hope there's not a fight. We got Pierre, you can't have maybe, I'm afraid. You can only have yes or no. Time will tell us. And this is one of the things you should do when you are practicing improvisation phrases. Count. That's something that's quite hard to get students to do, right? People who are here who are students, that's something that's quite tricky. So let's see. 1 and 2 and 3. So this is the note that ended up on the beat. So it's not just about the note you touch and then descend. It's about a note that is on the beat and then you descend, right? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. So it did make sense to have it in. So it's not just about descending from 4. So those people who said, yeah, probably keep it in were right. Those people who said no probably said no because we've touched the 4, right? So I can understand why you said no, because I said if you're descending from 4. So clarification. This is why we're making phrases live as we go so we can discover these things. Is that if that's off the beat, it's got to reverse, because let's say this F is off the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. It's much like me playing this from the 5th. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, but just missing the G. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay, hope that makes sense. Let's say if we dealt with a third. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Just because I touched the E and descended from it doesn't mean, we better put in an extra note. We've got to think about time in improvising. And those people who are thinking, well, think about time during improvising. I haven't got time to do that. If you haven't got time to do that, or you're not training yourself to feel time, then what's going to happen when you're in the tune and you're now coming up to the B section and you're not sure if you're about to play the B section or the second A section, or if you should be on an A7 or you should be on an E minor 7 flat 5. You've got to feel where you are, right? So no extra note, right? So that tells me the next one up the scale will need it. That kind of thing, right? Let's say if you play that phrase or hear that phrase and say, oh, that doesn't sound like much. Won't if we play like that, right? Better to have the chords for a bar each rather than half a bar each anyway. Okay, well, what if we cut off the first note? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Could be okay. Or let's put a half step at the beginning. Could be a good beginning for extending, yeah? So sometimes I will get students to have something fixed to work on and then something that's improvised as well, okay? Now, other things that come into your playing, perhaps we won't get into all of these today, otherwise I can see we won't cover all the material. But scale choices obviously become part of your work. Which scale goes where anyway? I think the good news is, I think it's good news, the way I learned initially was that every chord requires a different scale. So every time the chord changes, you must change scales. You know, there were some books and things that kind of got me thinking that. There were definitely some situations that I'd been in that got me thinking that as well. It's not the case at all. It's much more effective if we can zoom out and say, oh, well, let's look at, for example, all the chords in this tune that are in the key of C. So if I'm in the key of C and I get any of these chords, I can play C major all over them, right? Well, that's good, because it means I don't have to think Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, you know, all that stuff. For me, it's C major. And let's say if I do play up the scale. Okay, it's C major. Yeah. But there are, of course, scale choices that need to happen. So I would strongly recommend that you learn to use the major scale or dominant scale on a 2/5. So let's say it's D minor 7 to G7. You could think C major, as we just said. You could think of it more as a G7. Barry Harris used to do this. Because you get a bit more tension and release. Yes, they have the same notes in them, but they outline different chords and tensions, yeah? So, and they have their own scale rules as well. So that's another thing. And then the next thing I would work on would be minor 2/5s. I think one of you asked about minor 2/5s in the Q&A before the webinar. What should I do with a minor 2/5? Well, if you have, let's say, E minor 7 flat 5 to A7, that is 2/5 on a D minor. And actually, if you take the D harmonic minor scale, the 60% of you at the beginning that said you knew all your harmonic minor scales, this one's for you. And the 40%, it's also for you. But let's see the second chord of it is E minor 7 flat 5. And the fifth chord of it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, still the D harmonic minor, is A7. So it's not random that if you go to D minor that you get an E minor 7 flat 5 to A7 beforehand. And it also means that that's a great scale to be improvising with over that minor 2/5. So anything we did with scale phrases, for example, a third and then down, is going to work, right? So that's a third in that scale, down. But you know what you got to feel? You got to feel where the 1 is. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, a chord phrase. So then you also start having components, right? So let's put that in as something as well. Components, meaning that you join a third to a scale or a scale to a chord phrase. See, I had this diminished at the end. Why? Because it's also part of the scale, right? And it goes with A7 as an extension of an A7. If you've ever watched me, then you've probably learned this at some point. And now we got our components. A third, still down a scale, upper diminished, and then a landing, right? Let's ask in the chat box. So people type, please, the key of C, which minor sevenths do we get? Okay, we got a few answers. D minor, E minor, A minor. Exactly. Well done, those people who got it. I saw several of you got that. Exactly. So if that's the case, then we could practice E half diminished A7 to D minor 7 and still be in the key of C, by the way. This is not a key change for me. This is a way to approach chord number 2 in the key of C, right? And be improvising using the D harmonic minor. In E minor, we'd use the E harmonic minor scale on the 2/5, F sharp minor 7 flat 5 to B7 to E minor. Yep. And all the same rules, principles. And then when we're on A minor, B minor 7 flat 5, E7 to A minor, I would also want to work on that using the A harmonic minor. By the way, by the time I get to the A minor 7 chord, I'm in the key of C again. It's only for the 2/5 part, the B harmonic, sorry, the B half diminished or minor 7 flat 5 to the E7. So the key here is how to do 2/5 in minor. Exactly, Pierre. That's, I feel, is one of the first important things. After you've done some simple major 2/5 stuff, or 1/6-2/5, just using a major scale, I feel it's really important to start working minors because we get those 3 minors in every key. And we know now that we can use the harmonic minor of the landing. In other words, if we've got E minor as a landing, even in the key of C, we play E harmonic minor on the 2/5 that leads to it, the F sharp minor 7 flat 5, and the B7. And then we're back on E minor 7, right? So yes, those minors. And you know the cool thing about working things like that is that you can then start to work connections as well. Connections would be something like this. I would say, okay, I'm working E minor 7 flat 5 to A7 for a bar each. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to take 2 numbers. Let's take the 5 and 7 of E half diminished. So this is 1, 3, flat 5 and 7. Okay. And I'll go up the scale and down and see how to connect. 1 and 2. Connected okay once we went up the chord, right? There are some things that won't connect, so... Did I do that right? Okay, let me just... Yeah, I should have just taken 5 and 7. Or I could have just... Yeah, what I did was run from 5 to 7. It's not wrong. This time I'll just take 5 to 7. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Now I knew that was going to cause a problem because it's not landing me on a nice A7 note, right? So in this case, I'm giving myself a rule now. Okay, I've got to do something about it. 3 and 4 and 1. That's a connection, what we call a surround note, right? This is half step above, half step below, or semitone above, semitone below. And that is going to delay me a bit so I don't end up here, I end up there instead. Could still go up this diminished if we want. But this is not complicated, this just requires work, right? And then the last mechanic I'll discuss is my rules of thirds system. So in that we have all these little phrases that are built on thirds. Why built on thirds? Because all our chords are built of thirds. C major 7 has a major, a minor, a major. C7 has major, a minor third, a minor third. C minor 7 has a minor third, a major third, a minor third. Even C6, if you invert it, because that's not a third, but if you invert it, you're back to thirds, minor, major, minor. And so having a way to practice minor and major thirds is really useful. So I do stuff like this. I would call this an oop bop shabam pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, oop bop shabam, right? Chromatic note between the D and C. So then you could combine it with any of your scale stuff. Just put it at the beginning. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and oop bop shabam. See, so any scale things you had to continue down, like the Barry Harris rules, great. And we have several different types of rules of thirds and ways of using them as well, ascending, descending. Those are the mechanics that I want to discuss with you. You do not need to do all of them. Crucial to understand that. The thing with improvising is, this is the part of our art form that is more of an art than a science, let's say. So there is scientific stuff, of course, with scales and rhythm and stuff, but I find that teaching people how chord progressions work and how to put tunes together, how to get the melody note at the top in the right hand melody and all that kind of thing, those things are quite scientific, teachable. Doesn't mean playing them requires no art. Of course there's an art to playing them as well. But when you get to improv, you can't tell somebody every note that they're supposed to play anymore. You have to figure some of that stuff out, most of that stuff out, as a result of working in the right way and giving yourself a vocabulary. If you enjoyed that, we have plenty more on jazz skills for all levels of musicians, including a developing fluency course to get you in all the right habits and hundreds of videos on every topic, support from me and a vibrant community as well. Hope to see you there. Bye for now.